Good evening. We may have a few stragglers coming in because if you live in Sylacauga, you learn to wait at the tracks. And the train has been a major item all morning. So if people come in later, we will give them an excuse. If you leave early, we'll never speak to you again. So Dr. James Hansen is a veteran history professor from Auburn University. He taught there 32 years, served as department head, helped build it up and make it a wonderful unit within that university. He's the author of 16 books and noted that he did the book Kill Neil Armstrong. And, he walked around for weeks saying, I play golf with Clint Eastwood and we enjoy it. And he has a litany of stories he could tell about Neil Armstrong, but he's already told those. And so turn off your cell phones because this is a production that will be covered by some other agencies, and we don't want phones ringing. And your mother said, when you visit somewhere, you're supposed to be real nice, and be real nice and turn them off. But we're going to have a program today, the solo and together, the fantastic life of Charles Lindbergh and Anna Mara Lindbergh. And it's a thrill to have Dr. Hansen back. And Dr. Hansen will turn it over to you, and you just impress them. And if you don't impress them, make them mad. Anyway.
I can do both. Thank you. Well, over the course of my long career, getting longer every minute, I've never had a more fun and delightful place to come to give a talk than this facility here. This is a wonderful library and auditorium, and the audiences have always been so gracious, and the staff here is just terrific. So I'm just happy to have a chance to come again, and I think what you'll come to agree is a special program. You can always also already see that it's a little different than what you might have expected. Get to the next slide here. Now, let's see. Go back. Yeah, I'm already off to a bad start. You always have to know how the trigger works. On May 21st, 1927, the world awakened to a new passion. Crowds surged at Le Bourget Airport outside of Paris, pressing toward a small monoplane that had just staggered out of the night sky. 33 hours earlier, a 25-year-old airmail pilot had lifted off from Roosevelt Field on Long Island, and now he stood dazed atop the wing of his airplane, the Spirit of St. Louis. Lifted by strangers, his name already immortal, Charles Augustus Lindbergh had conquered the Atlantic, nonstop and alone. At the same hour, in the hushed stacks of Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts, Anne Spencer Morrow bent over her notes on the Renaissance humanist Erasmus. She was an English major, shy, immensely inward, still a month from her 21st birthday. Airplanes meant nothing to her. Emerging from the library later, she asked indifferently,
"Who is this Lindbergh everyone is talking about?"
This juxtaposition, Paris delirium and Northampton solitude, foreshadowed a marriage between these two people defined by asymmetry. Charles Lindbergh entered Anne Morrow's life almost as myth. Anne entered Lindbergh's life as a seeker. Their union, improbable as it was, would be shaped from the start by the hero-acolyte dynamic. What I have for you today is an origin story. It's a story of how two people nearly 100 years ago met, came together, and entered into one of the most remarkable marriage partnerships in all American society. It is a story derived from my forthcoming book, Solo and Together, which is a dual biography, a marital biography, really, of Charles Lindbergh, the world-famous aviator, and his equally extraordinary wife, the writer Anne Morrow Lindbergh. Well, what is an origin story? Every life begins with an origin story, not just a beginning, but a revelation, the moment when the seeds of who we are take root in the soil of what will be. It's less about when things happened and more about why. Where love and loss, ambition and fate first collide and set the course of everything that follows. For Charles Lindbergh and Anne Morrow, the story began in the glare of fame and the hush of solitude. Their courtship, their secret vows, their romance above the clouds, all of it tracing the outlines of a destiny neither yet could see. His iron will, her longing. Together they forged a partnership that would be tested by triumph and torn by tragedy, yet forever bound by flight. The best way to tell the Lindberghs' origin story is through the one who looked inward the most, and that was Anne. Her voice, shaped through diaries, letters, poems, and books, leads us across the years of their life together. Through Anne's eyes and her words, we glimpse the heart of a marriage, its joy and sorrow, its conflict and renewal, its place within the greater story of America and the world. In her reflections, we come to know both, each distinct, yet bound by the same flight, solo and together. To help us hear Anne more vividly, her words will be brought to life from this stage by Rachel Burttrum, an Alabama-based actress with extensive experience on stage, in film, and on television. Rachel studied theater at the University of Montevallo and the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and she worked on stage in New York as well as in regional theaters across the country. I'm delighted to have her today to embody Anne's extraordinary voice and perspective. And the curtain rises. For 33 and a half hours, Charles flew alone over an empty ocean through ice, exhaustion, and the endless dark. Then at last, the lights of Paris appeared beneath his wings. When his wheels touched the grass at Le Bourget, the world changed forever. Lindbergh didn't just win a cash prize, he won the future. He proved that distance could be conquered by daring, and that the age of flight had truly begun. May 21st, 1927.
The date is etched in other people's memories for reasons entirely foreign to me. For me, it was another long day deep in the stacks of Smith College Library. My mind absorbed in Erasmus. I was 20, not yet 21, and my world was the quiet order of words on vellum and paper, the steady breath of scholarship. I had been shaping a paper on the Northern Renaissance humanist whose voice seemed to me so sane, so humane, so endlessly searching. I lingered over his pleas for peace, his wry criticism of folly, his insistence that learning could refine the spirit. Airplanes? They scarcely entered my consciousness. Even the great noise of the day that some Lindbergh fellow had flown an ocean alone barely rippled the waters of my preoccupations. I knew nothing about him and cared less. When at first I came up from the silence, the deep silence of the stacks, a friend mentioned that the whole world was aflame with his name. I asked indifferently, "Who is this Lindbergh everyone's talking about?"
Anne Morrow was born in Englewood, New Jersey on June 22, 1906, the second of 4 children in a family that prized discipline, faith, and achievement. Her mother, Elizabeth, known to friends as Betty, read to the children every night. Even those evenings, from those evenings, came Anne's lifelong devotion to words, in reading poetry, or in the private honesty of a diary that she always kept. That early ritual shaped her voice, a voice the world would one day know through her published journals. She attended private school in Englewood, then an elite girls' school in New York City, where she served as a student body president. At Smith College, she excelled in literature, graduating with honors in 1928 and winning the school's highest literary awards. But don't think the writing came easy to her.
I am always too slow, always too hesitant, always on written exams. I sit and think it out before I write anything. I make little pencil jottings down and summings up. I collect the scattered, messy scraps in my mind before I try to answer anything. And then, of course, I never finish. This morning, my class on Shakespeare, dear, I will feel so much happier when everyone in the faculty realizes I have a very slow, thick mind. I never work enough, not fast enough anyway, really. I never finish. I never even get enough done. Why can't I keep up with other people? I am always saying, and I'm tired of saying, I only half did.
Though she was active in university life at Smith, Anne never felt completely secure there. As for the personal side, she wrote her older sister.
It is still very hard. I really don't see anyone. And then again, I really see more people than I ever have before because I'm so much freer, but not very deeply. It's a very new, strange feeling of touching many people, many more than before, superficially, and no one's touching me. And loneliness is most lovely and most desirable here. I really love it. All except a kind of physical loneliness that I have never experienced before. I never understood before that mad wish of some people just to have any humans, near me. Spiritual loneliness is hardly possible, and I never understood there is another perfectly reasonable kind, although I do feel it much.
Anne had boyfriends in college, nothing serious, mostly for dances and proms. The young men had a very high standard to meet. In her diary, she only identified them by the first letter of their last name.
There is F from Amherst, typical college boy, but nice. The veneer of culture touches everything a little, almost hits things, sometimes hits the right things. Nice, good-natured, agreeable, mediocre, platitudinal. The nature lovers. Lots of fellows will appreciate a sunset if you lead them on. A little appreciation seems to me even more insidious than a little learning. It taints everything it touches, and it touches everything. Just the veneer of appreciation, nothing real or distinctive about him. And there are thousands of him. I'd much rather talk to a garbage man.
Anne's high standards came from being immoral, as close to aristocracy as an American family could get. Anne's father, Dwight Morrow Sr., was a lawyer, banker, and diplomat who from 1927 to 1930 served as the U.S. ambassador to Mexico. A partner at J.P. Morgan and Company, He was also a leading figure in American finance. Her mother, Betty, was also prominent, active in social, charitable, and educational work. In December 1927, just 6 months after his flight to Paris, Lindbergh took to the skies again, this time bound for Mexico City. The journey had been arranged by Ambassador Morrow, Anne's father, who saw in Lindbergh's fame a chance for diplomacy. He secured the clearances, planned the receptions, and opened doors to Mexico's leaders and business elite. Flying once more in the spirit of St. Louis, Lindbergh turned a goodwill mission into a triumph of aviation and a gesture of friendship between the two nations. It was at the Morrow's hacienda in Mexico City that Charles and Anne met. Anne had come home from her senior year at Smith for Christmas, unaware of her life was about to change, joining her family for the Christmas holiday in Mexico City. She expected little from the encounter with Lindbergh, convinced that he and she had nothing in common. She was certain she wouldn't like him, and just as certain he wouldn't like her.
I am a little annoyed. All this public hero stuff breaking into our family holiday, what did I expect? A regular newspaper hero? A baseball player type? A nice man, perhaps, but not at all intellectual and not of my world at all, so I won't be interested. I certainly was not going to worship Lindy, that odious name, anyway. We drove through the streets and honked loudly before an iron gate with eagles above the crest. The gates opened. We drew up. A wall covered with geraniums to our right, a great movie scene door and staircase to the left, stone steps, red velvet rolling up like a wedding in between palms. Officers stood on the steps at attention. We tumbled out, dazed, and peered up the red plush stairs between lines of officers. What a movie! How ridiculous is all I could say.
Amid the fanfare, a quiet struggle began. The shy young woman who'd come to observe the ceremony found herself drawn to the man the world had already crowned a hero. In her diary, we glimpsed the first fracture in her composure, an awakening she tried to hide even from herself.
He is taller than anyone else. You see his head moving above the crowd. You notice his glance where it turns, as though it was keener, cleaner, and brighter than anyone else's, lit with a more intense fire. What could I say to this boy? Anything I might say would be trivial and superficial, like pink frosting flowers. I felt the whole world before this to be frivolous, superficial, and ephemeral.
She saw him in the crowds. She saw and heard the cheers, the adoration, but she also saw Lindbergh close up. He dined with the Morrows at their hacienda, joined their gatherings, spoke quietly with each of them in turn, and one afternoon in a Ford tri-motor airliner that had flown Lindbergh's mother down from Detroit, her home, Charles took them all up into the sky. Through it all, Anne grew less certain of her first impressions and far less certain of herself.
He is very young and terribly shy. Looked straight ahead and talked in short, direct sentences, which came out abruptly and clipped. You could not meet his sentences. They were statements of fact, presented with such honest directness, not trying to please, just bare, simple answers and statements, not trying to help the conversation along. It was amazing and breathtaking. I could not speak. What kind of boy was this? He goes at conversations as though it were a business transaction or a doctor's pill that he has to take. But he has a very refined face. Not like all those grinning Lindy pictures a very firm mouth, straight blue eyes, fair hair, and nice color.
Anne was sure that Charles was more interested in her elegant older sister, Elizabeth, spelled with an S, where the mother Elizabeth spelled with a Z. She was convinced that Charles was interested in Elizabeth, not her.
Why is it that attractive men stimulate Elizabeth to her best and always terrify me and put me at my worst? We sat around the fire, stiffly. Colonel Lindberghs stood awkwardly by the desk, shifting from one foot to the other. Elizabeth talked. I could barely manage. She was so wonderful and so natural with him. It shows that you are not thinking about yourself when you can do that. She is so much more like him than I am. I don't believe he ever thinks about himself.
To a crowd of young Mexicans that gathered down below a balcony of the American Embassy in Mexico City, Lindbergh gave an impromptu speech that mesmerized the crowd and astounded Anne. About it, she wrote,
Not a speech, not intentionally, not trying to move them by any means, just standing there, just existing. What does he think about it? What does he suppose he's doing? Why does he move them so? How does he explain that to himself? How does he explain this mad popularity? Does he think he, with his clear, far-seeing mind, does he fool himself into thinking? Is it his flight across the ocean that has done this? But men have done it before and will again. Or does he suppose that aviation has taken the world by storm? No, he can't. He is too clear-headed to fool himself that way. But how does he explain it? He must be terribly confused, for he doesn't realize anything strange about himself. Or else he avoids the issue entirely, does not question, just accepts. I am simply stunned by it all.
the airplane ride that he took them on was more than just the cherry on top for Anne. For her, being in the air with Charles masterfully at the controls, it was a sublime, transformative experience.
I remember watching him at the controls. He was so perfectly at home. All his movements, mechanical. He sat easily, not rigid, but relaxed, quite alert. One hand on the wheel, one hand. For minutes, I could not look away. I watched his most tremendous hands. And even later, when I wrote about that joyous flight in my diary, I could still see him. The grasp, the strong wrist, the grip of the thumb, his other hand rubbing his nose or something equally trivial. Every moment was quiet, ordered, easy, completely harmonious. I don't know how I can say that really. He moved so very little. And yet, you felt the harmony of it. As we approached the great peaks of central Mexico, I only wanted it to go on and on over the mountains. And in that moment, I understood why people can never give it up, this joyous adventure of aviation. No wonder Charles had such disregard for death and for life. This is both.
Anne remembers not looking down until the airplane was almost on the ground.
I expected a terrible bounce. I looked out at the wheels. They grazed the ground, a dust of cloud, but imperceptible, balloon-like bounce. And then again, we were down. A tremendous speed. We rolled and stopped. We stepped out, dazed. Constance and I watched Colonel Lindbergh's head in the cockpit window, turning and looking at the engine. It was a complete and intense experience. I will not be happy again.
At the end of the week in Mexico City, Anne continued to reflect.
This was to be, thank you. This was to be an objective diary. It stops here. I don't care how much I rave, if only I can get down to keep a little of the feeling of what has happened this last week. I wish to heavens I had written it down as it had happened, but I was too moved and too ashamed by my emotion. It has to be written down, though. It must. I must remember. The trouble is that for the first time in my life, I was not conscious of wanting to write it down. I've never felt so completely inarticulate. So often I have felt I cannot express this delicate thing. My instruments are too clumsy, too thick. But here now, all I can feel is my instruments are too small, too inadequate. I have nothing to express this, no way to deal with it. The best I can do is piece it together painstakingly, the small, superficial details, everything I can remember, everything, no matter how little, and rather blindly hope that a miracle will happen. That this conglomerate, patched collection of fragments may ignite somehow, at least for me. The idea of this clear, direct, straight boy, how it has swept out of sight all other men I have ever known, all the pseudo-intellectuals, the sophisticates, the posers, all the artsy people, all my life, in fact, my world. My little embroidery, beribboned world is smashed. Clouds and stars and birds. I must have been walking with my head down, looking at puddles for 20 years.
Before leaving Mexico City for his tour through Central America and the Caribbean, Charles made an offhand remark. He said that next time they met, he said this to Anne, he'd take the Moros flying one by one in an open cockpit airplane. A real flight, he said, not like the lumbering old Ford airliner. Anne smiled politely. She never thought it would happen. But months later, after her graduation in the spring of 1928, the phone rang at the Moros home in New Jersey. The phone is for you, Anne.
Who is it? He says it's the Lindbergh. I can't, I simply can't. I can't speak to him. Hello? Oh, how do you do? I'd love to, but well, you're very busy, aren't you? Oh my, I'm afraid I have to be away for a while. A minor hospital procedure. About 5 days, I think. You want to know if that's 5 days after today? Wait a minute. Would you mind if I went out and found out? I'm not sure when they'll let me out. Oh my, does that make me sound like a lunatic or a jailbird? Sorry, nobody is at home, only my mother's secretary. But she says I'll probably be out until about a week, so I'm terribly afraid. Well, that will be too late for you, but you were very kind to ask. Oh, really? You would still be free to take me up for a ride? I wonder, would it be too much bother if you called in a week. I think I'll be all right then. My father will be very pleased that I've spoken with you. I'll tell him. Thank you very much, Colonel Lindbergh. Oh my God! The Lindbergh! It's me! It's not Elizabeth! He is taking me for a ride in his airplane!
Charles didn't wait a day longer than what she told him her hospital stay would be. In fact, he called her the afternoon of the morning she came home.
Yes, I'd love to. Tomorrow, well, I suppose anytime. I'll be here all day. It really doesn't matter. Tomorrow afternoon. Well, anytime after 3. That will be fine.
Their meeting was arranged in secret. Anne met him at a friend of her father's, at a friend who had an apartment in New York City. And from there, Charles drove her in his new black Franklin sedan to the Guggenheim estate on Long Island, where he had been staying. Their secrecy, he said, was essential. If they flew from a public airfield, the tabloids would claim they were engaged. Perhaps to prove she wasn't the least bit interested in him romantically, Anne arrived in a wildly mismatched flying outfit. Her mother's riding pants and wool shirt, her father's golf stockings, a red leather coat. This is obviously a photoshopped picture. I couldn't find one exactly with that outfit on. Her street hat and high heels. When she confessed she debated wearing boots, Charles grinned, said, "Boots would have helped weigh you down if you had to jump," he teased, "but let's hope we don't have to use our parachutes." He handed her helmet and goggles, his voice calm, almost teasing. They'd fly over Long Island Sound, he said, then drift down over the tip of Manhattan. In her diary, she would later admit the flight was different, more charged, more alive. Something unspoken had passed between them, something that did not yet quite land, but was getting close.
It was some sort of an open airplane with dual controls. Colonel Lindbergh, who had let me drive his car part of the way to the Guggenheims, said he would at some point let me fly the plane. He was serious. But first, he had to give me some instructions with perfect gravity. Not paying any attention to my protests, he told me, now you pull this to go up, you push this to go down. The rudder works this way. Also, in turning, you have to push the stick this way. Now, when I point up, he was to be in the front of the cockpit, go up. And when I do this, go down. This straight ahead. And when I do this, he threw both of his arms out. The controls are all yours. And then when I do this, he tapped his hands on his helmeted head, let go of everything. Well, I was so afraid that I couldn't think. I didn't want this forced upon me. I didn't want him to see how dumb I was.
Anne loved everything about the experience. As she wrote to her younger sister, Constance,
I can't describe the flying. It was too glorious. Only when he threw his arms out, I was too terrified to look down. And then finding that the things actually worked, I stopped being afraid. He was a dear and nodded firmly and slowly at everything I did. It was such a relief when he tapped his head and turned around and grinned. We landed in a cornfield, just skidding over a fence. I can't tell you everything, but after it was over, driving back was such fun. He doesn't mind enthusiasm, airplane enthusiasm. And it was so easy to talk to him. He talked about publicity too, saying he couldn't go anywhere over the country without being watched, and then adding to my, ugh, it's rotten. Well, it's got to be taken. As long as it's coming to me, I have to put up with it. Does it keep you from much? I asked. Nothing that I really want to do, he said. I just do it anyway. I don't believe in letting publicity shape your life for you. And then smiling at me, he added, if you ever get into a crowd and they start mauling you, just kick their shins. They don't know who's doing it. Do you see what fun it was and is going to be, Con? I am going to see him again. And he's just like any other boy, only nicer, not a bit awe-inspiring, and really thrilling. Just nice, easy to talk to, natural, kind. A dear.
She returned to Smith College for her final semester, but the ground no longer held her. The classroom blurred, the pages lost their meaning. Her thoughts kept circling one name, one flight. For the next several weeks after Anne returned to college for her final semester, she had a very difficult time focusing on her studies.
Did I ever meet this boy? How could I possibly comprehend him? Or it? I am too small. I want so intensely to get this across to people, some people, those who will get it, what Colonel L is. They should know. Most terribly, I want to enlighten people about him, especially from the newspaper prejudice. He has a tremendous power over people, unconscious, untried for. He's sincere, spontaneous, direct. Nothing grates, never a false note, never a hint of smallness, never a tinny sound as one might expect in a vulgar phrase or badly kept fingernails. He wastes nothing, not words, not time, not thought, not emotion. He has an utter lack of recklessness, an amazing, impersonal kind of courage. He might have shown his genius in some other way, focused his life, power, force on anything. Amazing things would have happened for him, but he's more selfless than that. His clean-cutness, his freshness, nothing smeared, a keen sharpness, tolerant good humor, the way his smile completely changes his face, a small boy, hands in the pockets, straight looking at you attitude. I fear that my own mind would snap somewhere. Overwhelmed by him, I sat in amazement.
But still, Anne fought against her developing devotion.
Fool, fool, fool! You are completely and irrevocably opposed to him. You have nothing in common. You don't even sincerely give a damn for his world. When a person sees you most Sundays and then calls you again Thursday and every following day, well, I don't want to see any man that much. We would probably be living in a little minute, cramped, rented bungalow in some small town. So, I suppose I must be content with my world. The things I love, the things I stand for. Dear, I am perfectly happy. Why do I have to see him again? Oh, this new world of action and science is so upsetting to my world of books and introspection.
But Anne quickly and more than once changed her tune.
I feel now that I want to see no other boys of any eligible age at all, ever again. I can only be natural with delightful ones, younger than me, or else nice old married men. It gives me strength and a feeling of security to talk to Colonel Lindbergh and to be talked like he does. I suppose I must be content with my world, the things I love, the things I stand for. They seem just now utterly worthless compared to the world of Charles and airplanes. That world I cannot touch without him. Thank God for one Colonel L. It was a joy to see him. Just sentimental hero worship, perhaps, but he is the finest man I've ever met.
Charles courted through flight, wasn't through words. He invited Anne into his element, into the hum of engines and the code of the sky. He taught her to read the stars, to speak in dots and dashes, to master the cockpit's exacting rhythm. Anne, both dazzled and drained, refused to fall behind.
He is always testing me like it's an examination, one I feel I must never fail.
Their courtship unfolded not in parlors or over candlelight, but in the air, measured in takeoffs and landings, in flights over rivers, oceans, and the glittering lights of Manhattan. They built closeness at altitude, not in conversation. Psychologists would later say that couples who find intimacy only in the extraordinary often falter in the ordinary. For Charles and Anne, intimacy was adventure itself, beautiful, consuming, but perhaps, and more than likely, impossible to sustain forever. Their romantic adventure was overshadowed by the press. The press was a burden that troubled Anne far more than it bothered Charles. In a long, revealing letter to Sister Constance, Anne tried to put her feelings into words, then stopped. Some truths she realized were maybe better left unsaid.
I have suddenly had an awful thought. Suppose someone should open this letter. Wouldn't it be awful? I'd suspect a reporter of anything. I think I shall mark it from Mrs. Graham, my mother's secretary.
It wasn't the first time Anne worried about their vanishing privacy, the cameras, the tabloids, the constant chase. It was all new to her, but not to Charles. She ended a letter to her sister Constance with a quiet warning.
It would mean the end of everything for us for a while. For Daddy won't let me see him if it means publicity.
The headlines hardly touched Lindbergh. He'd long since built a wall against them. With a quiet, almost detached smile, he told Anne, "Don't worry about my publicity. It comes whether I want it or not. I just don't want it to hurt you." The publicity was troubling to Anne, and more than a little infuriating. The papers insisted that it was her older sister who had captured Lindbergh's heart. There were headlines: "Lone Eagle no longer lonely, courts Elizabeth Morrow." Another headline blared, "Miss Elizabeth Morrow has flown with Colonel Lindbergh and will again."
The damn liars! It made me cry with rage.
After only 3 dates, and without truly knowing each other, Charles proposed. He came to the Morrow home for dinner, then took Anne for a drive through the countryside. For once, there was no airplane. He called it their ground date. Somewhere along that dark, quiet road, he asked her to marry him. Anne's diary never mentions the proposal or a first kiss, but both are there between the lines of her diary. Their words grew softer, their silences closer.
You know, Charles, I didn't want to meet you at all before Mexico. My impression was that you were the incarnation of some stern Norse god.
Well, maybe I am stern.
Yes, you are, but you are very kind.
Anne opened up. She told Charles she wanted more than a college degree. She wanted to be a professional writer. He urged her to follow that dream, but she said she didn't know where to start. He nodded. He understood, he said. He'd left the University of Wisconsin with his own dream unfinished, an engineering student who dropped out. And in that moment, when he admitted this, confessed this to her, understood her, the couple recognized something in each other, two restless souls reaching for more than the world around them could sustain. At least that's how Anne pictured it.
But you knew what you wanted to do.
At Charles' urging, they kept their engagement secret for several weeks until they could return to Mexico City for Christmas 1928. He knew that once the news broke, privacy would vanish. When they finally told her parents, Charles asked Ambassador Morrow to delay any public announcement until after the New Year, when he and Anne were safely back in the States, out of reach of the tabloids. He thought perhaps there was a chance. Soon after, Anne confided in her sisters and a few close friends. To Constance, she wrote,
Darling, you won't repeat or mention to anyone, anything, will you? Not to Elizabeth even, or anyone. I have told you so much, but even to have any of us talking about him amongst ourselves is a dangerous idea.
To a trusted male friend and a recent college graduate named Corliss Lamont, whom Anne held in great affection, Anne wrote,
Apparently, I am to marry Charles Lindbergh. It must seem hysterically funny to you, as it did to me, when I consider my opinions on marriage. A safe marriage. Things in common. Liking the same things. A quiet life. Etc., etc. All those things which I am apparently against. But they seem to have lost their meaning or have other definitions. Isn't it funny? Why does one marry anyway? I don't expect or want anything like this. I think probably that was the trouble. It must be fatal to decide on the kind of man you don't want to marry and the kind of life you don't want to lead. You determinedly turn your back on it, set out in the opposite direction, and come bang on it. In true Alice in the Looking Glass fashion, Corliss, if you write to me and wish me conventional happiness, I will never forgive you. Don't wish me happiness. I don't expect to be happy. It's gotten beyond that somehow. Wish me courage and strength and a sense of humor. I will need them all.
To her older sister Elizabeth, she would write,
He's much more like us than you could imagine. He is not stern or abrupt or feelingless, and he's not divine or all-powerful or godlike. Also, he's appreciative of all the essentials in our world. He's amazingly understanding, sees far outside of his world, even into ours. He's terribly young and crude in many small ways. The books he's read and liking to play tricks, and quite seer-like in tremendous outlooks. Sometimes he will say something that retches terribly, and that, yes, he liked poetry. He argues superbly with Daddy and listens stonily to a frivolous and charming conversationalist. He's amazingly gentle and thoughtful and sympathetic, and yet cruelly relentless, sometimes probing your thoughts. He has a rapier sense of the absurdities in people. He's the biggest, most absorbing person I have ever met, and yet he doesn't seem to touch my life anywhere, really. As you can see, I am completely turned upside down, completely overwhelmed, completely upset. For months, I've thought of nothing else.
Their wedding was ultra secret, held at the Morrow home on Next Day Hill in New Jersey. Only family and a few close friends were asked and did not know when actually to arrive for the wedding. They weren't told until that very morning. Reporters were fooled by a decoy birthday party for Anne's mother. Phones were monitors, gates kept tightly closed. Anne wore a simple gown of cream chiffon stitched by a local seamstress. The flowers came straight from the Morrow garden. At Charles' request, the ceremony was stripped of all formality. Her father led her down the marble staircase to the drawing room, where Charles placed on her finger a ring of Honduran gold that he had been gifted during a Central American tour. After a brief reception, they slipped quietly into the night, bound for a secret honeymoon. That evening, filled with wonder and disbelief, Anne wrote to her mother.
Dear Mother, you were wonderful last night, and you left me so happy and feeling very courageous and ahead-looking. Thank you, darling. I love you. And I don't feel as though I were leaving. I have a permanent, happy, solid feeling of holding hands with both you and Charles. Oh, Mother, it was so lovely, I wouldn't change one thing.
Their honeymoon began in secrecy and disguise. While reporters chased a decoy airplane, Charles and Anne slipped from the Morrow estate, met a lawyer friend on the coast, and under moonlight were rowed to a hidden cruiser. For 2 blissful days, they drifted across Long Island Sound, free at last. But the bliss did not last. When they stopped for supplies at Block Island, someone recognized them. Within hours, seaplanes and boats were giving chase up the New England coast.
They found us again this morning. That terrifying drone of an airplane hunting you and boats. I don't feel angry about it anymore. It is inevitable. But it was a terrible shock to wake up from that blissfully quiet existence of being nobodies, free to go anywhere, to stay quietly and watch and enjoy things without being followed, stared at, shouted at, to be waked by the harsh, shrieking voice of a reporter outside our window one morning. Is that Colonel Lindbergh's boat?
If Anne hadn't realized it before, the honeymoon made it plain. There would be nothing ordinary about their marriage. Theirs would be a lifelong voyage under public pursuit. Over time, Anne's view would change, became more realistic. By 1973, 45 years later, and just a year before Charles's death from cancer, she would look back and write,
Romance was not the deciding factor in our relationship. Rather, romance was what the world saw and applauded in our engagement.
But unlike most brides, she was the one that had been congratulated by friends and family, not Charles. He was the prize.
Hadn't I found and captured the hero of the hour?
Looking back on the late 1920s, later in life, Anne came to see herself that she had been a page to Charles's knight, a role, she said, that had come naturally to her because in school plays she'd often played the page, mirroring her devotion to her older sister Elizabeth. But 40 years later, into her marriage, she wondered, had that role been love or surrender?
Was this a good base for marriage? Hardly. But that changed. I changed. I leaned on another's strength until I discovered my own. Maybe not a bad beginning.
Not a bad beginning, but without question a precursor of the truly remarkable, complicated, difficult, exciting, and tragic life together that Charles and Anne would come to live. They began in earnest inexperience, 2 young souls bound by flight and by faith in each other, but what followed would test every boundary of love, loyalty, and endurance. Within 2 years of their wedding, the unimaginable happened. Their firstborn son, Charles Jr., was kidnapped and murdered, and the Lindbergh name, once synonymous with triumph, became entangled deeply in tragedy. The experience was in itself another origin story. Anne wrote her mother on May 14, 1932, 2 days after the baby's body was found.
Charles got home from Trenton about 2 a.m. and was, as you would know he would be, wonderful. He spoke so beautifully and calmly about death that it gave me great courage. In the conversation about the whole thing, 2 or 3 things came up that are not exactly consoling, but kept us from remorse. They think the baby was killed on the first night. So nothing we could do could make any difference. Not if we had tried to keep it a secret. We couldn't have anyway. Not if we could have kept the publicity down. Not if the ransom bill list had not been leaked out. From the blow on the head, the baby must have been killed immediately, Charles said. I don't think he knew anything about it. Of course, it makes the kidnappers the lowest brutality. I cannot conceive of it. I think it is well they did not have the baby long. C did not even lie down last night. They are, of course, working on tracking down all the evidence. But he says he will sleep tonight. My letter sounds strange and unfeeling. I can't express what I'm feeling. C is inarticulate too, but very courageous.
For many months, the grief was unspeakable.
Terrible night. Do you think about it so much, Anne? All the time. It never stops. I never meet it. It happens every night of my life. It did not happen, and it happened. For I go over the possibilities of it not happening. So close, so narrow they are. So hard do I think about it that almost I make it unhappen. That terrible feeling, that pushing against a stone wall, that insisting, no, it didn't happen. And then always like a bell tolling, like a clock striking, inevitably, it did happen. Then at last back to the only comfort, death. We will all have it. In a century, this distance between him and me will be nothing. And then he did not suffer. He did not know a blow on the head. But I want to know what he suffered. I want to see it, to feel it even.
Then came the trial, what they called the trial of the century, where one kidnapper, and one kidnapper alone, evidently, was the villain. A trial that made Anne and Charles subjects of tabloid media and much more, once again, stronger than ever. Both of them testified in court, Charles first and at much greater length.
He was a wonderful witness, as he would be. Natural, perfectly clear, and of course, sure of the truth of his statements, which withstood any cross-examination.
Following the trial, they fled the country and moved to England. Not as heroes, but as exiles seeking peace from a country that could not stop watching them, stop hounding them. They took with them a new son, John. In Europe, Lindbergh became more than an aviator. He became a reluctant spy. At the request of the United States Army Air Corps, he assessed Hitler's growing air power and sent secret reports to Washington as the world would inch toward war. Back home, it looked far simpler and far darker. To many, Lindbergh seemed a Nazi sympathizer, even a Nazi himself. But the truth then, as it is still, was much more complicated. Not necessarily nicer, but far more complicated. And a lot of people do not pay attention to the fact that he was there on an intelligence mission. When the Lindberghs returned home in 1939, with war breaking out in Europe in September 1939, Charles became the lightning rod of a divided nation, denouncing Franklin Roosevelt, president, opposing America's entry into the conflict, and earning both adoration from many, but also condemnation from many. In September 1941, 2 months before Pearl Harbor, Lindbergh gave a speech in Des Moines, Iowa, for the America First movement, in which he asserted that the Jewish community in America was one of the primary forces pushing the nation toward war in Europe. Anne had edited the speech and tried to get him to remove specific mention of the Jewish community, but he refused to delete it. He thought he was just being objective. In her diary, Anne would lament.
His speech throws me into a dark gloom. He names the war agitators, chiefly the British, the Jews, the Roosevelt administration. He does it truthfully, moderately, and with no bitterness or rancor. But I hate to have him touch the Jews at all, for I dread the reaction on him. No one else mentions this subject out loud, though many seethe bitterly and intolerantly underneath. C, as usual, must bear the brunt of being frank and open. What he is saying is not intolerant or inciting or bitter. It is just what he says in private, while the other soft-spoken, cautious people who say terrible things in private would never dare be as frank in public as he. They do not want to pay the price. The price will be terrible. Headlines will flame. Lindbergh attacks Jews. He will be branded anti-Semitic, Nazi, Führer-seeing, etc. I can hardly bear it, for he is a moderate.
Boy, there's a lot to unpack there, but no time here to do it. The book does it. After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and the U.S. immediately entering the war, so did Lindbergh. Moving the family to Detroit, he helped the Ford Motor Company create the assembly lines that built the big Allied bombers. He consulted on the design of fighter planes for the Navy, and even unofficially, I should say, make it very clear, unofficially, he flew combat missions against the Japanese in the Pacific. Anne endured it all. Motherhood and solitude, faith and doubt, raising 5 children while her husband courted danger, controversy, and eventually other women. She found her own voice in solitude, starting to write in the not long after the war started, she started to write Gift from the Sea, a quiet masterpiece which was published eventually in 1955 that spoke to millions of women about the search for self in the shadow of love. And still, the Lindbergh story deepened. After Anne's death in 2001, the world learned that Charles, who died in 1973, had 3 secret European families, 3 mistresses, 7 hidden children. How much or how little about this Anne knew is still a matter of conjecture in the Lindbergh family and in my book. Yet Anne had too known her own secret loves, her own awakenings. So it's a story of brilliance and blindness, of soaring ideals and human frailty. Together they span the century's extremes, fame and infamy, love and betrayal, isolation and connection. They were never ordinary. They were never simple. They were always and entirely solo and together. Let's give Anne the last words. This is from Gift from the Sea, which she published at age 49, 27 years into her marriage, and as a much more mature and experienced woman than when she fell for Charles. Herself still searching, still being the seeker.
When we start at the center of ourselves, when we discover something worthwhile, extending toward the periphery of the circle, we find again some of the joy in the now, some of the peace in the here, some of the love in me and thee. which go to make up the kingdom of earth, the kingdom of heaven on earth. The waves echo behind me. Patience, openness is what the sea has to teach. Simplicity, solitude, intermittency. But there are other beaches to explore. There are more shells to find. This is only the beginning.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Rachel Burttrum. Is there time for a question or two for me or for Rachel, for that matter? Is there a question anyone would like to ask? Yes, sir.
How many pages of diaries?
Oh my goodness. There are 6 published volumes of letters and diaries that are edited. Anne selected, and I think her daughter Reeve selected in the last volume. But it's the mass of letters is probably reflecting 25% of the entirety of her collection. Most of her letters, they're either at Smith College or they're at Yale, where Lindbergh's Charles papers are too. So had to spend a little bit of time with them. But I've tried to read every possible word. And for me, I was approached to do this book by the Lindbergh Foundation, which was created after Charles's death in 1970, and it was created in 1974. And they're thinking, the Lindbergh Foundation is looking ahead at 2027, which is the 100th anniversary. So they wanted me to do a book about the foundation, really, and how Anne and Charles's vision led to what the foundation's up to. And I talked to them, and I thought about it, and I went back and I ordered some more books. I ordered all these volumes of Anne's. I knew the Lindbergh story pretty well from teaching the history of flight, but I really hadn't paid that much attention to Anne. I had no idea that there would be an opportunity or a reason to have another book about the Lindberghs. But when I read Anne, what Anne had to say, I came to the conclusion, there's no way to understand him without understanding their marriage. And so Anne is a crucial window. Now, the hard part is, and I won't get too long-winded about this, but you have her words, and the wife telling you about the man. And that takes you a long way. But at some points, you have to say, well, boy, she's pretty naive about this or that. Is she deluding herself? How fair is this portrayal? This gets especially tough when you get to the America First years, the pre-World War II years, and some of the speeches that he gave. And she even admitted in later letters that she felt that maybe she was being a little too defensive about it. But I decided that a marital biography that looks at both of them through the lens of their marriage was very much needed. And there's a major biography of Lindbergh that A. Scott Berg wrote in late 1980s that won the Pulitzer Prize. So it's a really welcome book and a lasting book. But a lot has come to be known in the next nearly 40 years. And Berg knew nothing about these three European families. Nothing at all. Of course, the Lindbergh family knew nothing about it until 2004 when one of the families called a press conference in Munich, Germany, and announced that they were the children of Charles Lindbergh. And of course, that got a lot of publicity. But there are a lot of people that still don't know. When I mentioned that in here, I guess there are a few, reactions that made it clear that maybe I'd never heard of this before. So anyway, there's a lot there, and it makes it such a rich, because she's such an I would like to ask Rachel actually a question. She's depicted a lot of different characters in her acting. What did you pick up on her as major elements of who she was and how she looked at her marriage and at Charles specifically?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was digging into one of the first you shared with me,
Volume 1.
Volume 1. And you can see, even in the passages that you share here, she's so conflicted, of what she thinks that her life was supposed to look like. And then this character shows up in her life, She's quite a strong character herself, And
you have to also take into consideration the time, the pressure that she must have felt being so publicly aware of the whole world watching. Her own family had a prestige, and so what would that mean? You know, there's a lot of things that she would have to take into consideration. And so what do you do? How do you navigate through that yourself, through those waters? They're really uncharted waters because there's nobody that she could sort of reference to say, well, how are you handling this? Because what an individual circumstance between the baby and it just was on and on. But she was quite a strong character. There's something that we talked about. There's a passage that jumped off the page to me. Her whole family, the lineage, the women all went to Smith. And she said, I decided I want to go to Vassar. And they're like, why? And she's like, well, I need to be my own person, and this is what I want to do. Now ultimately you see she goes to Smith, but to even have that sort of forward thinking of I need to find myself, so even with the Gift of the Sea, she's still sort of a seeker through her whole life of trying to find herself.
Any other questions for us? Well, thank you for your patience. We kept you a little bit longer than the dress rehearsal took a few less minutes than what the actual presentation is. But thank you so much. We enjoyed it, presenting it. You've always been a great audience here. Thank you.
Thank you to Rachel and to Dr. Hansen. And it does feel like a good continuation of the first story that you started here with us a few years ago. So how many of you were here and saw Dr. Hansen's other presentation on the Lindberghs? Okay. So if you did, you realize this is another good angle on that story. So maybe we'll have to get you to come back and do that again sometime for people that didn't see it.
I think the book will be pretty controversial. Anything you do with Lindbergh these days is that. A lot of people think they already know all they need to know about him. And one of the basic things I discovered, I'd studied him in most different facets. I'd reviewed books about him and movies about him and everything. I thought I knew everything I needed to know. Anne opened my eyes to that it's not black and white. There's not much in life that is. And so my goal was not to judge him, evaluate him. It was to evaluate. It wasn't judge him or castigate him or incriminate him. My major goal, the only one goal, was I want to understand him better, and hopefully that's going to be good enough that we have a better understanding of him. And if you want to judge him to be a villain, you can still judge him for being one. If you want to hold this or that against him, you can do that. But I want to at least put it into a better, sharper context than what we've gotten over the years. So we'll see how that works. Yeah, we're still St. Martin's Press is putting it out, and we've got a little bit of a struggle. It's either going to come out in the spring of next year or in the fall. And a lot of this is out of my control. It's what their marketing department tells them about what's going to do better and what other titles are coming out from the press at the same time. So it will be out before the 100th anniversary of the flight. But it's been as an author, you've got to have some patience. It takes a while, and it was a very big book. We're getting it down in size a little bit. So, well, thank you very much.
One other thing I want to mention too, we talk about this all the time. We spoke about it at lunch just a little bit, is the importance of hanging on to those historical documents, even if it's just your family histories or photographs, things like that. If these documents were not made available, there would be no way to research these things. So history is so important. So hang on to what you have, make it available in some way if you can, because people would like to know.
People like to know. My wife and I is in the back. When we were at the Yale Archives and we uncovered the box that had all the love letters back between Lindbergh and the three European women, photographs of the babies and all that, that was maybe a box that someone would have wanted to have destroyed at some point in time. When we think we're the only ones that have literally looked at that particular box. So,
what was the difference in their ages?
4 years.
4 years.
4 years, yeah.
I know you alluded once.
Yeah, 4 years. So not too much of a difference. And one thing that struck me is they both were, You have to read between the lines a little bit, or the sum total of what you're reading. I think they were both, as far as love goes, I think they were both relatively inexperienced, very inexperienced, in fact. And in fact, I don't know if Charles ever dated anybody before he asked Anne for a date. There's no real evidence that he has. The tabloids would say that he's with this or that person, but they weren't true. So these were two pretty naive young people that fell in love, and I don't know. We read from Corliss Lamont's letter that Anne wrote to him, and so she did have some pretty close male friends or college graduates and more literary kind. And there are times when I've wondered, would she have been better off marrying someone like that than Charles? It's a question that you just sort of ask and let it go. But you just kind of wonder if you know the whole story, and the book will give you the whole story, because it gets pretty dark as the years move on, and complicated, more and more complicated. There are times when you think, boy, it just seems like this would have been easier for her if she had married someone that was a little less difficult and more like her and her background than Charles. So, anyway.
Thank y'all again
bet.
very much. Thank
You
you.
bet.
Thank you all so much for being with us. This does wrap up our Brown Bag Series. Thank you, Mr. Chris Kramer and First Bank of Alabama. Thank you, Dr. Shirley Spears
Terrific.
with the
You
Comer
are so
Library
terrific.
Foundation. And I do want to let you know, be on the lookout. We are going to have our Christmas concert in December. Right now, we believe tentatively it's December the 10th, but we will do a mail out on that. We will also be doing a Library Foundation recognition that day for Representative Ben Robbins. So just make sure to be on the lookout in your mail for that to come in December. Thank you all so much again, and we
You're
hope that you
welcome.
have a great week.